you go on Twitter or Reddit and you'll get slammed for what I may be about to say, which is, I think it's terrible. Yeah. I don't think this is good for the market. I know there are people who think that getting more people interested in the market in this way is a good thing, that people are going to get educated, they're going to learn, they're going to get interested, and that is a good thing. I think when people lose a lot of money, which I think they ultimately will, it's a bad thing.
Welcome to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. I am Donny Deutsch, and this is the podcast that is built around one simple premise, that everybody, everything today is a brand. Every celebrity, every athlete, every politician, every company, every product, every movement, every religion, everything is a brand. There's a set of values today. Look, if you've got a Facebook page, you've got a brand that you're creating. And what we do on the show is two things. We go through our brands of the week, and these are the brands that are kind of shaping the zeitgeist, taking us up and down, which brands are up, which brands are down, and which brands are kind of really driving our culture and our society. And I also do an iconic interview with an iconic brand individual themselves. And today it's Ross Sorkin. Andrew Sorkin, one of the smartest guys around, probably the most important financial journalist of our time. He created Billions. He wrote Too Big to Fail. He's the creator of the Deal Book at the New York Times. He's a co-host of Squawk Box and CNBC. We're going to talk about democratization of stocks and a lot of interesting things today. But first, it's our brands of the week. That's right, the ones that are shaping where we're going and how we're getting there. Let's get right to it. First brand of the week, a brand down for Barack Obama. And you won't hear that from me very, very often. I'm a huge Barack Obama fan. But this weekend, he's celebrating his 60th birthday in Martha's Vineyard. Now, we don't give him a brand down because he's turning 60. We love people in their 60s here, says the old 63-year-old. But he's having a huge birthday party at his home in Martha's Vineyard. So over 400 people, 200 in staff, so 600-700 people. And I don't know, I think it's a little tone deaf right now in the world of Corona. Now, obviously, he's saying in the invitations, everybody's got to be vaccinated. But it was interesting. I had originally been planning my daughter's bar mitzvah for this August, and we canceled it in advance. And even now, with people vaccinated with the Delta variant, I would just be concerned. And you're one of the leaders of the world. You're the after Joe Biden, or the most important Democratic voice out there right now in the country, even though you're an ex-president. And I just don't think it's necessary. I know people go to ballparks and things like that, but a private party of 600 people, when we're in this kind of uncertain time, don't need your birthday party. I'm actually shocked, to tell you the truth, and really surprised. And I think it's a bad form. You're going to have a lot of celebrities there, the who's who. You'll have Oprah, you'll have Spielberg, you'll have George Clooney, but I think it's tone deaf. And so it's a brand down for Obama. You won't hear a lot on this show, but that's what we got. A brand up for bipartisanship. That's right. The $1 trillion infrastructure bill being brought to the floor. 17 Republicans backing it. The Democrats all backing it. It can happen. There you go. I mean, and it feels good. It really, really, really does. That I would take, from a political point of view, the $1 trillion built on bipartisan, than a $2 trillion non-bipartisan. I think this is what this country needs now. And I think it's a great signal that when you put something that makes sense, building our roads and bridges and our broadband infrastructure, what people want, and yay. I wonder what the other 33 Republicans were thinking, not voting for it. But bipartisanship does exist. And speaking of bipartisanship, I want to put a brand up for what, and I've talked about this on MSNBC, for what I'm repositioning the vaccine, and I want to call it the Trump vaccine. You heard me right. It was interesting, and why I'm drifting out of bipartisanship. In his speech last week, Biden talked about, he brought up, it was just one line, a throwaway line. He goes, this vaccine, which was brought forth and put forward by a Republican administration, now being administered by a Democratic administration, he gave credit. And I think a way to get a lot of the unvaccinated vaccinated, let's call it the Trump virus. I don't give a shit. I mean, let's give the guy credit. It happened under his administration. If that's going to convince some of the 90 million people, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders wrote a op-ed about this, and I say, let's rebrand that vaccine, just like there was Obamacare. It's a Trump vaccine. Let's give that asshole credit. And if it's going to get one more person vaccinated, I think it's a great rebranding exercise. So brand up for what I'm now calling the Trump vaccine. We're going to stay on politics a little bit longer. Brand down for a quarter of Republican men. listen to this one. And this is in a New Morning Consult poll, very serious poll, that basically 23% of Republican men have a somewhat favorable or very favorable view of white nationalists. So that means just right off the bat, 1/4 of Republican men are out and out severe racists, white nationalists, not nationalists, white nationalists. And you could put in white supremacists right next to white nationalists. It's the same thing. And 23% of Republican men say, yay, thumbs up. So big brand down for 23% of Republican men. Brand down for Jim Jordan. One of the epic jerks, obviously congressman from Ohio. When he was asked by Fox's Bret Baier, and Bret Baier is one of the true straight shooting Fox anchors, as opposed to the Tucker Carlsons and Laura Ingrams, whether or not the former president talked on the day of the Capitol riot to the president. So you're asking Jim Jordan during this, this very trying time, obviously, and what's important is who knew what when. Did you speak to the president the day of the January 6th riot? His response is, I've talked to the president. I've talked to the president so many, I can't remember all the days I talked to him, but I've definitely talked to the president. Could not recall whether he spoke to the president on January 6th or not. Bullshit. Who are you kidding? These guys there's just no limit to their depth of vulgarness. You don't want to admit that you talked to the president because you're going to get attached to this thing. And shame on you. You don't remember. If you're not well enough, you talk about Sleepy Joe, if you're not well enough to remember, if you spoke to the president of the United States while the Capitol was being overrun, then you don't deserve to be in office. You're not of sound mind. Also, while we're on this topic, huge brand down, and he's fighting for one of my brand down of the week all-time downers. He seems to come up every week. Is both Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham, basically both mocking the police officers who gave the testimonies that were so riveting, who served on January 6th and almost lost their lives. And you couldn't be a human, forget Democrat or Republican, and listen to their testimonies without feeling something. But Ingraham, meanwhile, accused the officers of exaggeration or playing politics, and talked about that they should get Oscar awards for their behavior, and also saying that what's interesting is that Michael Fanone, the police officer, didn't mention experience any trauma during the time he spent last year referring to the killing of George Floyd. Well, maybe he wasn't under duress during those riots. Incredible stuff. Brand up for Mitch McConnell. There you go. Mitch McConnell, brand up, because basically less than half of Kentucky residents are vaccinated. That's his home state, obviously. And McConnell is they're running a $7 million ad campaign. They're running a series of 60-second spots on 100 radio stations in his home state. And he's using some of the $7 million in his own campaign account to finance these ads to get people vaccinated. There you go. Mitch McConnell, way to go. I've taken a lot of shots on this show. I'll give you credit. He says not enough people getting vaccinated, so we're trying to get them to reconsider and get back on the path. And this is get some level of herd immunity. So there you go. There are some Republicans out there that are kind of, there are many Republicans that are, when it comes to the vaccine, are speaking truths and speaking intelligently. Brand up to a lot of corporate America, folks. I'm going to mention some corporations: Walmart, Disney, the Washington Post, Saks Fifth Avenue, Morgan Stanley, Google, Facebook in this instance, although they get brand down for so many reasons I've talked about, spreading misinformation. But they're all saying to their workers, you have to get vaccinated before you get back to work. Look, companies, corporate America needs to play a role here. You don't have a right, by the way, just like you don't have a right to go into your company dressed a certain way, you don't have a right to go into your company and scream fire. There's not every human right in a private enterprise. And you're not entitled to everything. You work for a private company, and private or public companies that are private, that are not public enterprises, in effect, have the right to say, no, you're not safe, and we're not going to put our other workers at risk. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. And I wish every company would do it. If I was still running my ad agency, I would say, you're not vaccinated, you can't come back to work. You're going to be furloughed. Doesn't mean you get fired, but you're on furlough. You're not getting paid until this is done, or whatever it is. And so good job for a lot of corporate America. And I think more and more are going to step on it. They need to do it. There are certain instances that private enterprise has got to get involved with the government, and here's one of them. A brand up for stretchy pants. Yes. Post-pandemic, we've talked about a lot of fashion stuff post-pandemic, but it seems as if stretchy pants that are more comfortable, that have bigger waists, are going through the roof. Companies like Lululemon and Althea or Athleta are benefiting from this. Levi Strauss CEO Chip Bergh recently said that Denim Make estimates about 35% of Americans' waistlines have been altered over the past year. And look, comfort is going to be in going forward. There are certain things that happened in the pandemic that were not going backwards. People lived in sweats for a year and a half. Doesn't mean they're going to stay in sweats, but they're going to want something in between sweats and what their previous work clothes are. So there you go. Brand up for Scarlett Johansson for standing up for herself. This is an interesting thing. She filed a lawsuit against Disney, and in her movie Black Widow, in her contract, she gets a certain percentage of the box office, but Disney's decided to open the movie partially in theaters and partially on Disney Plus, their streaming service. And Scarlett Johansson is claiming that, well, she's losing a lot of money as a result of this, not opening in theaters. I can't believe this wasn't black and white in a contract. But I'm assuming Scarlett Johansson has some reasonable legal counsel around her. And if she lost a dime as a result of them putting one extra show on Disney Plus, she deserves it. So brand up to Scarlett Johansson for standing up for herself. Huge brand up for YouTube. Now, all we hear about in streaming services is Netflix and Amazon and Apple, whereas YouTube, which is owned by Google, owned by Alphabet, is going through the roof. YouTube booked a whopping $7 billion in advertising last quarter. That is up 83% from a year ago. They're outpacing Netflix. They're outpacing Amazon in their growth. It's like they really seem to have a handle. Netflix revenue grew by 19% from a year ago. Compare that to the gigantic growth in YouTube. There's no comparison. And, YouTube has got a hold on a whole universe of folks out there. And now that you've got all kinds of original program in addition to all the kind of just nonsense that people watch on YouTube, watch YouTube to start to really, really make inroads in what has been seen as the behemoths of the streaming industry, particularly Netflix. I love this one. Brand up for Daisy Princess culture. Now, anybody who listens to this podcast knows I love everything princess. I used to love playing Pretty Princess with my girls growing up. I don't really dress like a princess anymore. If I did, we're not going to really talk about it on the show. No, I don't dress like a princess. I don't. But it's interesting. There was a big debate for years that were little girls who were kind of into the Disney princess culture, where they somehow was it stunting their growth? Was it putting them too much in a gender box, in effect? And were they somehow not as evolved as other girls who were not subject to the Disney culture, that they didn't, they had these kind of weaker views. And what's interesting in the study is that they showed that, and they followed kids over, starting with the age of 5, and then they followed them till 10. And they kind of separate the kids that had a lot to do with watching and living Disney princess characters versus girls that didn't. And what's interesting is the opposite, is that even though in most of the movies, the Disney princesses get rescued, that the new Disney princesses have this very empowered way about them. And whether you go, it's, what's the ice movie? Let It Go. But that's having a positive impact on gender identity and not pigeonholing and saying, oh, I'm going to be weaker and I'm going to be somebody that's just going to stay at home and raise kids. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that would be the more gender stereotypical thing from historically past. So interestingly enough, it's helping women's self-identities and it's developing what their healthier views about gender roles. So yay for Disney princess culture. And let's get a huge brand up for Simone Biles. I mean, about as big a brand up as you'll ever get on this show. Everybody knows by now that obviously she, because of stress and because of issues she was having, she bailed out of a lot of the competitions. And what was so interesting to read about it was you take for granted as you see these young kids twirling in the air that how they're putting their life and limb on the line. And when she started to talk about the twisties, how your brain almost has to let go of thinking to let your body do certain things because they're so inhuman to do, so unnatural. And that once she was not feeling right, she just bailed out. And good for her. God bless. It just, it's like, it just showed she's a human. It shows that even the greatest athletes in the world have to deal with a lot of distress and anxiety and things that sometimes when it comes to your own well-being, you have to step off. And I think that she's a hero because of it. And I think that her brand, from Madison Avenue's point of view and everywhere, will even be enhanced. Because if you really think about it, let's say she won another 3 or 4 gold medals. Okay, we know she wins gold medals, but now this whole other human dimension where you see her, and not only do you want to salute her, you want to hug her. And I think that's going to translate. This is not why she did it, but I think the irony is some of the original people go, "Oh, she's an Olympic athlete. She shouldn't do this." And comedians like Michael Che, who took shots at her, have been getting a lot of shit, understandably so. That I think that it's going to actually help her endorsing brand, because she's just this lovable figure now who's a hero in other ways. So big brand up for Simone Biles. Also on the Olympics, Caleb Dressel. Is it Caleb or Caleb Dressel? He joined the elite club, swimmers 5 golds, and he's got those tats on him. I think the tattoos are going to really help his brand. It's like the next level of Michael Phelps. He just looks like this cool, badass dude, not the typical kind of, well scrubbed, perfect U.S. Olympian. He looks just like a bad boy. And I think he's going to be a poster boy coming out of the Olympics, even more so than he had won his 5 golds. Guy's ripped, obviously. All these guys are ripped, but the whole tat thing, I think, is going to be a Madison Avenue dream there. Interesting brand sideways for Elon Musk and Tim Cook. And I'm going to bring up this anecdote to talk about really the way corporate brands are shaped in the end. And they're just shaped by 1 or 2 individuals. That it goes to the story 5 years ago. This isn't a new book coming out, and both parties have denied this, but that Tim Cook called Elon Musk up and wanted to buy Tesla when Tesla was struggling about 5 years ago. And Elon Musk said, well, sure, but I'm going to be CEO of the joint enterprise. You can buy my company, but I'm basically going to push you out of a job. And of course, Tim Cook said, no, get the fuck out of here. And it's interesting how these major mega deals are done, yes, theoretically on synergies and what's right for the corporations, but by what's right or wrong for 1 or 2 individuals. Had Tim Cook been ready to maybe step down in a life in his career, he might have bought it and stepped down and would have changed the face of everything. So what you forget when you read about the major media every one of these major, takeovers or, mergers start and finish with the goals of a handful of very 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals. And let's not forget that. This is an interesting anecdote. Go by. Pizza Hut. Brand down for Pizza Hut fashion. Pizza Hut is coming out with a bunch of, I'll explain why. Last week I talked about Cheetos, and they were getting together with, I think, Little Baby, one of the rappers, and doing this whole Cheetos, they have that Cheetos bear or the cheetah. Well, who's the animal? There's a Cheeto. It's cool. It just seemed right for Cheetos, this funky brand. Let's come out with some fashion items. Let's get together with a rapper. But Pizza Hut is doing it. It's about fans expressing their love for the brand. They're putting tracksuits that are embodied with the chain's iconic red checkerboard tablecloth, a gold-plated chain, 24. No, people don't really want Pizza Hut apparatus. Just like they don't really, if Cheetos did it straight and they didn't do it tongue-in-cheek and they didn't get together with a rapper and they didn't kind of use their own goofy, iconic guy. There's something very kitsch about the Cheetos thing. Playing it straight up like Pizza Hut's doing this. Come on, man. Show me the person that really wants to wear Pizza Hut gear. That's just because we want to put pictures of pizza on. I don't see it there. Speaking of pizza, Dominos, big brand down. Not their fault. It just happened. But they were, Ad Age has their winners and losers of the week. I guess they stole the brand ups and brand downs from me. No, they didn't. I don't even know when they started it, but there's plenty of room for everybody. Domino's was advertising on the WWE or one of the wrestling broadcasts on TNT. And that, in case you're missing wrestling, what's going on there, one of the wrestlers, of course it's fake, took a pizza cutter to an opponent's neck and pretended to be cutting his neck with a pizza cutter. This is great entertainment for the kids at home, of course. And it was followed immediately by a picture-in-picture Domino's ad that kicks off with one of the pizzas being sliced by a pizza slicer. So you came immediately out of a guy's neck, big fat guy's neck being sliced by pizza into the actual pizza being, they didn't set it up that way. They apologized for it, but certainly a brand down. A brand up, and I think this is brilliant marketing on KFC, and it's a campaign that's running in the UK and Ireland, And it's basically the brand is promoting quality chickens, their product, with animal welfare standards on farms. Now, obviously, they're killing the chickens, but what they're talking about is that, we became the only business awarded top tier status for World Animal Protection Pecking Order, and that they worry about the welfare and how the chickens are slaughtered and how they're raised. And they said they were going to drop the C-bomb on national television. The C-bomb is actually talking about chickens if you're selling chicken, because you just don't want to see live chickens running around, I guess, if you're eating chicken. And, they had taken a lot of crap, KFC, in the past from 2017 when they had a chicken twerking a rap track front and center in one of their ads, and people thought it was in bad taste. You're showing the chicken, and now you're going to show the buckets of fried chicken. But they're doing a very kind of intellectual, cerebral thing, saying, okay, we know you're going to buy chicken, and we just want you to know we're doing it the right way, and we're concerned. And I think that's smart. I think it's interesting. I don't think it's going to repel people. So I think KFC a brand up. Brand down for California. Well, I'm going to take some shit from this. And brand down. Bacon may disappear. I'm a big bacon guy on this show. We talk a lot about bacon. Bacon may disappear in California as pig rules take effect. And basically, there's a new, I can't say brand down for California because I'm going to seem like a bad guy. I'm just going to say brand, shaking my head. Beginning of next year, California will begin enforcing an animal welfare proposition approved overwhelmingly by voters in 2018 that requires more space for breeding pigs, egg-laying chickens, and veal calves. And the national veal and egg producers are optimistic they can reach these standards, but only 4% of the hog operators now comply with the new rules. So basically, what the hog operators are saying is we can't produce it the way you want us to produce it and make a profit, whatever. So 14% of all the pork is produced in California, and there may be much less bacon going around. So I'm not going to say brand down because that would be insensitive, and obviously the animal rights people are working in the right direction. But anything that leaves us with less bacon, I have big concerns about. So brand up for weed drinks. That's right. Obviously, we all know cannabis is and all the cannabis products, and they're legalized in many states now. But interestingly enough, a very small, only 2% of the $20 billion weed marketplace is on beverages where you actually drink weed. And if you put your marketing hat on, if you want to convert, alcohol drinkers to weed versus saying, eat candies or smoke or vape, hey, you can drink, there's no calories in it, there's no hangover in it, that's going to be the bigger. So I think we're going to wake up 10 years from now and liquid weed is going to be the biggest part of the cannabis business. And finally, a brand up for pineapples. Okay, I love this story. A couple accidentally gave a signal they were swingers while on holiday. There was a couple who was on holiday. Where were they on holiday? Does it say here where? Was it at the end? They were the Indy 100. And they were wearing matching, they were somehow in the pit or whatever, they were wearing bathing suits, and they were wearing matching pineapple bathing suits. And what they didn't know, and they all of a sudden got a lot of friendly winks and stares and from people, is that basically when you wear pineapples or you put a pineapple on your mailbox out front, it says a swinger party is going on. That's a sign that you're a swinger. If you're wearing pineapples on your gear or in front of your house, and here they were wearing matching pineapple. So before you put on that next pineapple Hawaiian shirt, it may say that you're a swinger, and so be careful about that. And those are our brands of the week. I want to talk to you about Wondery and the business wars and the birth of Vegas. Las Vegas, there's no other place on the earth. Everybody loves it. Every year, 50 million people go there, and they empty their wallets in the city's economy. But while Vegas may be the entertainment capital of the world, it has a very dark crime-riddled history. Throughout the 20th century, untold sums have been laundered through the Vegas Strip and casino. Owning billionaires have exerted untold influence over American business and politics. In each season of Business Wars podcast from Wondery, you'll hear riveting stories of rival businesses battling for supremacy. So it's the Business Wars podcast from Wondery, and this one is all about the newest season explores how Vegas went from a sleepy desert town to a financial powerhouse with a dark side. In the last 7 decades, organized crime families, both the federal and Nevada state government, and a handful of powerful billionaires have all fought over control of Vegas. Business Wars has the gritty story of how those power plays either won big or lost it. So this is all about the birth of Vegas and all about the infighting that went into it. It's where crime syndicates come together with business conglomerates, with politicians. Really interesting. So listen to Business Wars, Birth of Vegas on Amazon Music, Amazon Podcasts, or you can listen 1 week early and ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app. Go to the Wondery app. You got to listen to Business Wars, the latest episode on the birth of Vegas. Now for my interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin. Andrew is such an interesting guy, has tremendous insights on who we are and where we're going. As I said earlier, he is one of the most important financial analysts, journalists, provocateurs of our time. He writes for the New York Times. He is the co-host of Squawk Box on CNBC. He is the co-creator of Billions. He wrote Too Big to Fail. He was writing for the New York Times when he was 15 years old. Here's my interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin. Well, I am thrilled that our guest today. He is a special guy. He is inarguably, the most important business journalist of our generation, of his generation, because we're different generations. Probably one of the most important journalists, period. He's just an important guy, and it's Andrew Ross Sorkin, and I'm thrilled to have him here. And before we start, I have to thank you because you are responsible for the pinnacle of my professional career. That I had season 3, episode 1, I had a cameo on Billions. And that was my high point. That was my high water mark. It would not have happened had you not co-created that show.
Well, I can't claim responsibility for your cameo. There were other higher powers involved with that, but thank you. And I don't believe that was your highest moment, but if it was, God bless.
Thanks for being here. I really, really appreciate it. It's an interesting time. We're going to talk a lot about the market today, what's going on, but I'm really fascinated in how you started out. That you basically in high school were writing for the New York Times, and just take us back. I want to do a little. This is your life, Andrew Ross Sorkin, in terms of you were 15 years old and you reach out to an old friend of mine, Stuart Elliott, the advertising writer for the New York Times, and you're in high school, and take it from there.
Well, I was even just saying this to you before we got on together. I always wanted to be like you. I wanted to be an ad man. I was fascinated by Madison Avenue and advertising, and this is now in the 80s and 90s. I just couldn't get enough of what was happening in the agency world and what was happening in terms of how advertising was impacting culture and the zeitgeist. And so what I wanted to do back then, I didn't want to be a journalist. I actually wanted to be in the business. I wanted to be either in the advertising business or on the business side of a media company. And when I was 15 years old, I started a sports magazine, not really because I was interested in sports, though I was, but because I thought we were distributing this magazine originally inside our high school, and later we tried to do it nationally. We were not successful, but I thought it was an opportunity for advertisers to sell advertising to kids. And I know people probably have their own views about trying to do that, but that's what I was trying to do when I was 15. And I used to read Stuart Elliott religiously because my mother would drive me down to the city, and I'd go to different agencies and try to sell my ads. And we had some success early on, and we tried, as I said, to turn it into a national magazine. It didn't work. It was actually one of the great sort of lessons in my life, but it led the New York Times to write this very short article about us when I was, 16, 17 years old. And then I started basically stalking Stuart Elliott, who I read, he was like, most people read the sports section or the front page of the New York Times. I went to like page C6 every time.
This is when advertising was a bigger part of our popular culture, and there was a daily advertising column in the New York Times.
Every single day. And I used to read it because I wanted to act like I knew what I was talking about when I was talking to people like you.
Right.
When I was trying to sell this kind of stuff. Anyway, I stalked him and stalked him and stalked him. He finally said, "Sure, kid, come on down. You can work here for free for 5 weeks." Basically, I didn't tell anybody what the deal was, that I was even there, because it wasn't really allowed. I was in high school. And the third or fourth week I was there was an editor named Felicity Barringer, who I owe much of my career to beyond Stuart, who didn't know who Aldo was. I was wearing a blazer, maybe a tie, I think. She overheard me talking about this thing called the internet, back when we would write, like modem, a device that transmits data over a phone line or something like that. And she thought I was a writer at the time, so maybe like a news assistant or something. And she assigned me a story to write. And I went back to Stuart and I said, "You're not going to believe it. I just got," and he was like, You're in effing high school. You can't do this. Go tell her who you are." And so anyway, but we didn't tell her. We actually didn't tell her. And I wrote the story, and they published it the next week. And that's how my career began.
And how many stories did you actually write for the Times while you were in high school?
I don't know the answer. I think because I know you're asking the question that like Wikipedia or something says like 70 or 80
70
stories.
is the number that I've got here. That's insane. I was learning to tie my shoes at that point, and your article number 70 in the New York Times. Wasn't college boring after that?
No, I actually enjoyed college a lot, but I enjoyed it partially because I was writing a lot for the Times.
Yeah.
This is going to sound like either precocious or pretentious. I had a fax machine when I was a freshman. Because I would fax the articles into New York, and I'd have people sending me stuff, and I loved it. I actually had I went to Cornell, and I had a ball. In my junior year of college, I ended up going to the London School of Economics for part of the year, and that's actually when I started covering more sort of I started covering business news for the New York Times based in London, and that then led me, when I graduated, to move to London, cover business and mergers and acquisitions for the New York Times, and so I enjoyed my college career.
You really blew up, and I mean that in the positive sense of the word, the financial crisis of 2008. You were right. Obviously, you wrote the definitive book, Too Big to Fail. We can talk about that a little bit. Do you remember the moment, you're 30 years old, where you were like, wait a second. Obviously, there was a point when Lehman went and whatever. But did you, when you were stepping, because you're covering this for a living, and was there a moment in time where you said, holy shit, the sky is falling, before it kind of really was falling?
Sort of. And I don't know if I should say this aloud, but, I will, I guess. It was the summer before, in 2007, there had been this blow up at BNP Paribas, and there had been a blow up with Bear Stearns. And back then, as a journalist, I'm not allowed to manage any of my own money. I can't buy individual stocks. I can't do anything. I can own mutual funds and whatnot. But I had put what very little money I had aside and given it to one of these guys who runs a blind trust, which you're not supposed to have any access to or be able to do anything. But once a year, I'd have lunch with the guy. And you're not allowed to really tell him anything, except I remember telling him distinctly, I don't know if we're in bank stocks, but we really shouldn't be. Please get out of the bank stocks. I think this is just going to be a bad situation. Of course, what I can tell you now is that, of course, he didn't get out of the bank stocks. He thought that they were a great buy, and I would watch the statement every month go down. And
so
down,
what did you
down,
see in the summer of 2007?
You saw the cracks in the credit system. What I think the lesson for me, even now, and I think about financial crisis, every financial crisis is a function of really only one thing. It's too much leverage in the system. And there's a point at which that leverage breaks, the confidence starts to break in the system. And I think you started to see that about a year out. And then you sort of saw this herky-jerky moments where people were trying to get more confidence that everything would be okay. And then, of course, everything wasn't okay and things came undone. But so I had concerns. A lot of people like to say they knew.
Yeah.
Michael Lewis wrote a great book called The Big Short about a bunch of guys who knew.
Right.
And part of the argument even back then was that somehow everybody knew but looked the other way.
Right.
I've never really believed that was the case, because if everybody really knew, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
I think there were a lot of people who were praying and hoping. I think that part was true, but I don't think they knew.
When you talk about the kind of the simple, and I mean simple in a complimentary way, explanation of when things crash, when there's too much leverage. So why are we not crashing now? And the system has never been more leveraged than it is right now.
Well, so
I know
it's unclear. No, it's unclear how leveraged the system is today. So there's two kind of components of leverage, right? So back then, the banks, we talked about the context. People use the phrase too big to fail around banks. Mm-hmm. Today, banks are not actually where the leverage is at. In fact, I would argue to you, and it's a little scarier, the leverage today is we use the phrase too big to fail in the context of cities,
it's the country. That's
states,
what I'm talking about.
Countries,
yeah.
Right. Well, the difference is that countries can print their own money. It can create an enormous amount of inflation. But what's happening right now is everybody is effectively printing up a lot of money. Mm-hmm. The thing that's happening is that so many countries are doing effectively the same thing, right? Europe's printing money the way we're printing money. And so what I don't know is whether they effectively cancel each other out. All the money printing. It might not, and we'll find out. But I'm not in a couple of years, if not sooner.
To pick up on that point where, and you've said always is first personally, or the advice to give is whenever things are just really, really shitty and tanking is obviously when you buy, as painful as it is. And when they're super frothy and everything is pointing to the sky is to sell. I've never felt a situation as frothy as it is right now, where every tree is going to the sky and it just worries worries the hell out of me. And when you put that together with the fact that just everybody's printing money, there's this little piece of my gut, and I'm not an economist, I'm not a finance guy. I mean, I went to Wharton, but I was a village idiot in Wharton, that just tells me that we're walking into a buzzsaw. I don't know why I feel that way in my gut.
So, Danny, I don't think you're wrong. I think we probably are walking into a buzzsaw. The question is, when are we going to walk into the buzzsaw? And is it possible the economy and the stock market and everything power higher along the way? And the only reason I say that is I remember back in 2005, I want to say 5, 6, it felt really frothy. Maybe even 4, maybe 4 or 5, it felt really frothy. A lot, private equity was going crazy. And I wrote a bunch of stories, I remember, that were very skeptical about what was happening at the time. Like, this was crazy town and this was going to end very, very badly. And the truth is, it did end badly, but it ended badly 4 years later. Famously, Alan Greenspan, with his famous phrase around irrational exuberance, he said that, I believe, in 1996.
Yeah.
Things didn't go bust till 2000.
Yeah.
So that's the thing I don't know. And obviously, it's such a cliche. It's like, if you did, you'd be in a different profession, right? Yeah. But that's sort of where I'm at.
Obviously, probably the biggest financial story in the news in the last year or so, the meme stocks, is GameStop and AMC.
Totally.
I actually, one of my big positions was one of the hedge funds that got killed in GameStop. It just, not stocks that I'm picking, but they got caught that you would know the fund. Where are you coming out on all this? Is this good for the world? Is this bad for the world when you have something like GameStop, that is valued at, I don't know if it's 15 billion now, wherever it is,
right.
That should not have that valuation. And you have obviously the inmates running the asylum. And I don't mean that derogatorily about the inmates, nor do I mean that about the asylum, but it's turned upside down. So on the one hand, you have this democratization of stocks,
totally.
But yet it's completely synthetic in certain ways. And they're gaming the market in a strange way, the way the big guys have gamed the market. So where are we in all this?
So I think you just framed it totally on the money. And I always worry almost about what I would say about it, because you go on Twitter or Reddit and you'll get slammed for what I may be about to say, which is, I think it's terrible. Yeah. I don't think this is good for the market. I know there are people who think that getting more people interested in the market in this way is a good thing, that people are going to get educated, they're going to learn, they're going to get interested, and that is a good thing. I think when people lose a lot of money, which I think they ultimately will, it's a bad thing. That's just where I come out. And I sort of come to this with the sort of, and maybe it's some kind of paternalistic, consumer protection thing. And it's sort of a function a little bit of 2008 too, when people criticized, frankly, the media. They said we didn't blow the whistle loud enough, right? And you could argue by default we didn't, because the crisis happened. I think you got to blow the whistle. Now, the flip side of it is, when you say that kind of thing on your podcast now, where you say it on TV, you're right in the paper, so much of the people that are involved in this today say, no, Andrew, don't stop trying to protect us. Stop it. You're not protecting, because you're not protecting us. What you're protecting is the system. What you're protecting is the establishment. You're protecting the hedge funds. You're protecting the man. And so it's sort of a very interesting sort of mind F, if you will, of how I used to think about it. Because it used to be that most of the people out there said that they thought the Wall Street guys were bad and they wanted to be protected from them. Now they're saying, no, we actually want to take them on and we're going to beat them at their own game, which is fascinating.
The simple formula, if somebody's going to manipulate it, let us do it. Who's to say what the fundamentals are? And it's just, but I'm with you. I don't know if it's because of
what I don't know, and I don't know if we're going to know for a while, is how much of the stock movement that you're seeing today is actually a function of quote unquote retail, or if it's actually retail, but it's actually the hedge funds and the pros on top of retail that are basically playing a momentum game. And I think you're going to see, especially in the GameStop scenario, at least early on a couple months ago, that was clear. It really it was retail for a bit, and then it was the pros effectively handing it to retail. So I don't know. I'm concerned about it. The question of then is, what do you do about it? Because there is a sort of a freedom of speech issue. Yeah. You want people to be able to say what they want to say. Elon Musk, can he say what he wants to say? Is the SEC supposed to crack down on that? If they crack down on folks on Twitter and Reddit, and are not at the same time cracking down on what are called idea dinners in the hedge fund world, where people, at least pre-COVID, used to get together and share what they thought were their best ideas and talk them up. And was that a cabal? And so this is where I'm not sure what the right answer is.
I hear you. And that's a dotted line into crypto. And I finally invested. I bought some Ethereum and I bought some big.
You did?
I finally, just literally a few days ago. And what I finally said to myself.
What price?
I think I was in at about 33 on Bitcoin, 34. Where is it right now?
On Ethereum or Bitcoin?
Bitcoin was 33, 34. I forgot what Ethereum was at the time.
Okay.
Here was what I kind of came to just from a macro point of view. That at the end of the day, the fact that the young people believe in it will just will it to stay. They're not letting it go away. You know, they're not, and that's why I kind of went into Ethereum also, is that like, it's just, I'm not saying I timed it right, but I really believe if I step back over 2 or 3 years, that it's not that blockchain is not, and something might replace Bitcoin. So I hedge my bet there, but that it's here. It's here, and every investment bank is setting up systems. So it's just here. It is. And it's just to just ignore it and go, hamana. Having said that, it's still the Wild West, and all of these fringe things are ridiculous. But give me the 2-minute Andrew Sorkin dissertation on crypto.
Okay, I think crypto is here to stay. Crypto is a real thing. Blockchain is very much a real thing. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that Ethereum is absolutely a real thing. Because it has a demonstrable functionality, if you will, within the ecosystem. Now, I haven't mentioned Bitcoin, and we haven't talked about valuation, meaning how much is this stuff really worth? That is a different question. So, but let me hit Bitcoin first. Bitcoin, to me, is still, and I think probably will always be, a commodity of some sort. Maybe it's like gold, maybe it isn't, but it's a speculative asset that doesn't have the value.
Doesn't have a real utility value in our culture.
It has no utility value. Whatever value is imbued by effectively
supply
a belief system. Yeah. And I know there are people out there who say it's math, but I think that's what it is. And what I don't know, again, about the valuation piece, and you're seeing it just even happen this week, is, you know, China is basically saying, we're not doing this anymore, folks. And so the price of Bitcoin is, you know, being slashed because people are saying that if you take the largest country in the world out of the game, what does that do? And what we haven't had yet is any form of real regulation in the United States about Bitcoin. So, you know, right now there's a new fund that's actually going to allow people to put Bitcoin into their 401ks. We still have not really regulated this, but I think that regulators are going to, if they didn't want to regulate it, they're going to be forced to, because it could sort of reach this escape velocity issue. So I don't know what the value of it is. Maybe it's $5,000. Maybe it's $1 million a coin. It's somewhere in between, and I think it's very hard to know.
Well said.
Ethereum, I think, is, as I said, I think has actually a lot of value in the system. Again, though, some people talk about Ethereum as like a protocol, like an internet protocol, and you know, HTTP and just other like internet protocols don't have intrinsic value. So it'll be very interesting to see sort of how people value this stuff over time. I think it could have a lot of value. It might not. I think there's a lot of interesting. It's like Ruby on Rails.
It really
it's like a cool software program, but like, is there value to that? I mean, how would you value that? I don't know.
I want to get back a little bit to your kind of core philosophy and the place that you have in the industry. And a great quote I have from you is, a lot of people look at the world of money and business or politics as being about big institutions, about math, about numbers. I've never seen it that way. I've always seen it through the prism of people. What makes you tick and what is motivating you to do what you do.
Isn't that what life is about? Yeah. I mean, look, all of these companies, we talk about business in these sort of grand terms and math terms. They show you charts on TV. They show you dot plots with the Fed and the this and that. It's really about people.
Yeah.
It's about people. It's people like you.
Yeah.
You were an entrepreneur. You started a business and you made decisions. And some of those decisions were strictly mathematical, but I'm sure a lot of them or because you knew this guy
sure.
or that
and look,
guy.
And scale that to the biggest level. What people, you understand it, when AT&T and Discovery do a deal, it's because maybe a guy like Zaslav said, you know what, I think I want to do this. It doesn't. You can work back and say it makes sense for all these reasons, but it's individuals and their needs and their drives and their egos. I don't mean ego in the bad sense of the word, but that's the way deals get done. It's not mathematical. It doesn't fall from the sky. It's guys running their little juggernauts and going, hey, I think I have the financial vehicles to make my juggernaut bigger than your juggernaut. And it goes from there.
Look, and so as a storyteller, that's the story that I like telling. And I have sort of a very romantic notion of business. There are black hats, there's white hats, there's good guys, there's bad guys. They're trying to do different things. They're motivated by, some people are trying to screw their best friend over. They're trying to sleep with this, whatever it is. All of these different things make for a great story, but they also have a huge implication on the country, on policy, on sort of how we live today. And I think business has, in a way, never been more important and played a sort of bigger role in how we see things.
Along those lines, and I get asked this a lot on TV, is all of a sudden, businesses have grown a social conscience. It's just every business, and I've said it this way, and I wonder if you agree with this. I said, in my experience, most CEOs are decent people and have decent soul, but at the end of the day, they're there for shareholder value. That's what they're there for. That's their job to. And what they have all realized is that when you look at consumers who are 18 to 34, 18 to 49, that in their buying process now, what is critical to them, what is tantamount beyond equal to the product is, how do you feel about stuff? You know, you better be on the right side of voting rights. You better be on the right side of racial equality. And that CEOs have seen God. And that, yes, it is being driven, because I do, as my experience, as I said, most of them are decent people. But this newfoundness is because we are in a woke nation. This is post Me Too, post George Floyd, and this is here to stay. So how much in your experience is being driven by good guy CEOs versus, hey, this is the bottom line play at this point, and you have no choice, actually?
Ooh. You know, I think nothing in life is black and white, so it's probably a combination of both.
I agree.
Think people want to be, I think everybody's always wanted to be good. I don't think that people have wanted to be bad. I think today they see the pressure, they feel the pressure, and they know the pressure is real and actually, but can also have a bottom line effect both on the good side and the bad side. You know, it's funny. I have a friend, I would say very much on the sort of progressive end of things, who said to me, you know, Jeff Bezos, why can't he just offer he's so rich, why can't he offer everybody at that company, instead of paying $15, $16, $17 an hour, why doesn't he just offer $25 an hour, $30 an hour? He's so rich. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, they've been trying to put the prices up, put the wages up. But A, it's not his company. But B, even if he wanted to do that, even if he was the greatest guy in the world, then there's the question of could he pass those costs actually onto his customers? And there's where the math part comes into play, which is, you know, can you sell enough stuff at those prices? And so I think that there's upward pressure on all of these issues to try to deal with the social issues, but there's mathematical pressure on the other side, oftentimes pushing down. And I think they're meeting a little bit closer to maybe marginally more balanced than they used to be.
Speaking of balance, interesting, in your deal book conferences, the guests that you have there, the speakers, the attendees, really say it all of your philosophy about covering business and where business sits in the world today. You'll have anybody from Bill Gates to Kim Kardashian to Reed Hastings to Hillary Clinton to Anthony Fauci, LeBron James, Elizabeth Warren. And I think it's the only conference from any ilk, whether it's entertainment, whether it's politics, that understands the worlds are truly intersected. And LeBron James and Reed Hastings have a lot in common, have a lot of mutual interests. And so take me behind the scenes in putting that together, because I never knew to the extent of the diversity. I mean, I don't mean racial diversity, but diversity from the leaders of the world from all walks of life. And I find that fascinating.
Well, so it's interesting. When we first started doing this event, and this will be the 10th year this fall that we're going to do it, back to in real life, thank God. But when we started it, the world was coming just out of the financial crisis, and the sort of most important issues at that time, and the people that seemed to be leading them did seem to be Wall Street was playing a huge role. It was sort of a Wall Street and Washington crowd. But I think over time, over the last 10 years, the world has intersected in so many different ways. And so the most sort of critical, influential people in the world don't necessarily all start in the world of business, but we look at all of this a little bit through the prism of money and through business. But philanthropy is now playing a huge role.
Yeah.
Kim Kardashian, by the way, is an entrepreneur, a remarkably successful
I love when people poo-poo the Kardashians. And I'm like, first of all, number one, none of those girls drink, all right? None of them do drugs. Obviously, the mother's the brains behind the operation. But talk about brand building. Talk about,
I got to tell you, I have such an impressive view of that family.
Yeah.
And now I've met a lot of them now. But I can tell you, Kim Kardashian is so buttoned up,
right,
such a pro in every single way.
It doesn't happen any other way. It doesn't happen any other way.
By the way, oftentimes more professional than some of the people who have, CEO on their business card.
I love that.
I mean, really, I have to say that I blow the preparation, just the way they approach it. It's the real deal. So anyway, we've tried over the years to bring together what I like to think was the most consequential people of that year who can really speak to what's happening. And as you said, it's all intersecting in ways that I know when we first started doing this, I don't think that we expected. But it's been really, for me, selfishly, just fascinating, just sort of fulfills sort of a great curiosity.
It's got an important place in our culture right now. Let's go to Billions, my favorite show. First off, and I know obviously, and I know Brian Koppelman well and David, and you co-created with those guys. Take me to the beginning of it, how this kind of came about.
So for me, I'd written Too Big to Fail prior and had worked on this film for HBO, which was a ball. Worked with Len Amato, who was the head of HBO Films back then, who I'm now actually working with on a GameStop film for HBO, right, with Jason Blum. But back then, Richard Plepler, Curtis Hanson was our director. Paul Giamatti, who's obviously in Billions, played Ben Bernanke.
Oh, that's right.
We just had such an amazing cast, and it was just such it was a pleasure to work on, but it was an education for me. Like I was just learning so much, and I thought, wow, this is a cool world. Could I try to do it again? Once you do something once, you think you got to try again. And this is probably 2010, 11, and I started sort of thinking up ideas around TV shows. And at the time, there really weren't any shows. People had tried to do Wall Street focus shows with not such great success. And I thought, could you do a show that's, has that nuance, has that sort of, feels real? And at the time, hedge funds were the thing in sort of on Wall Street, but increasingly even in culture. And so I started focusing just on the world of hedge funds, ended up actually having a meeting in LA with an agent who said to me, you know what, Sorkin, these Wall Street shows never work. They never work. People, the stakes aren't high enough. People don't like these kind of shows. They don't like these kind of people. This is not a good idea. So I go home, and my wife, when I came home, happened to be watching Law and Order, just a repeat, like on USA Network. And I remember saying to her, it's so interesting. People love legal shows. They love procedurals. Why do you think they love, like a procedural? People just love it. They always do. And I remember the next day I was like, okay, you know what? If you could set this world of hedge funds against this legal world, it's almost like a Trojan horse to get an audience interested. And if you could set the main characters against type, meaning, it sort of like Tony Soprano, you think you're not supposed to like this guy, but you sort of fall in love with him. You're fascinated by him.
Anti-hero.
And if the person who you think is supposed to be doing everything in the name of right on behalf of the government, on behalf of the public, may not always be doing that. And I'd covered, by the way, both of those sides. I'd covered a little bit of white-collar crime, and I'd seen that in action. Anyway, so that was sort of, for me, the eureka moment. And then I spent about a year meeting all sorts of different people, potential partners, to put this thing on its feet. And then I actually thought the whole thing wasn't going anywhere. And then happened to get a call again from my agent, Joe Cohen at CAA, who said, there's two guys. Do you ever watch Rounders? I said, yeah. And they said, well, they called me, and they're thinking about something in this kind of space. You should go meet them. And I met them, and we're off to the races. So
what's interesting is, yes, that it was a eureka moment, but the thing that makes it work is the humans and the flawed humanity, and it just goes back to even your whole premise of what you cover in business. But like Mad Men, so much of it is the sexy milieu. That it's interesting that you were that everybody was like, no, Wall Street, no, they're interested. When you bake it in and you look at the sizzle part of it, forget the steak, forget the storyline, forget the character, which is obviously what makes it. It's porn. I mean, it really is. That is what I think the average person watching it is not. They're not even. I think some of the copy they're not even understanding some of the script, but clearly the characters they can, and clearly the love letter, or I don't know if it's love letter, but the clear demonstration of wealth and sexiness and power in New York City is an aphrodisiac.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. The folks that deserve the credit, you said you know them, Brian Koppelman, Dave Levine. I now consider myself the proud papa of the show, but they're the writers, of course, the proud writers, and they deserve an enormous amount of credit for doing this now into its 6th season. They're working on that now, I think. So
one question on Billions, and I'm friendly with both of them. I actually had Stevie Cohen on my podcast. We haven't aired it yet, but we taped it, and he was fantastic. And there's been rumors that it's a combination of Stevie and Howard Lutnick, who's also a friend of mine from Cantor. How much truth is that to that?
Not true. Not true. I mean, the truth is, at least from my vantage point, when I started first even thinking up these ideas, Steve Cohen wasn't even really in the picture. The hedge fund manager, to the extent there were hedge fund managers in the news in this kind of world, it was, do you remember Raj Rajaratnam?
Who went away? Yeah, of course.
He went to prison. Who obviously is nothing like Steve Cohen, is nothing like Bobby Axelrod. So no, I don't think, and I don't want to speak for Brian David, but I think that today the writers and everyone in that room, I think thinks of these people as individual, as characters. I mean, as like fully rounded people. I don't even think they're thinking of this as a composite of this and this. I think, early on we'd read a lot of stuff to try to, understand different parts of the world. And I obviously knew a lot of people in the business, and we'd pull them into the writer's room and stuff early on.
I think the only reason people think it is because, as in any good writer, any good producer, they pick up, and for instance, the Bobby Axelrod character, is in Connecticut, and a lot of the guys wear, vest, fleece. And so the same way if you're doing an ad story, you're going to dress guys like ad guys and whatnot. And I think I remember because we put him in Westport, then people thought he was Ray Dalio, and then someone else, he did something else, and they told me that he was Dan Loeb. So it's, I always thought the Dan Loeb character was the guy. I can't remember the name of the character, but he shows up as a hedge fund. He's a little guy, whatever.
Played by Danny Strong.
That's right.
Yeah. No. You're not thinking of Danny played it.
He ended up being Treasury Secretary, or
right. Yeah. Yep.
All right, let's go. I want to go a little bit in the day of life of Andrew Sorkin, and then I'm going to let you go because you're one of these guys. Like, how do you do it? I mean, you're on Squawk. You're putting the deal book together. You're writing books. So take me through. You get up at what, 4:30 in the morning?
4:30, which I'm told is late in TV land. I think that the really good ones wake up at 3:30.
How does the sausage get made? You have a blank page every day, both in terms of what you can do on Squawk and particularly what you can write about. And it would be overwhelming to me because it is a infinite landscape.
Okay, so just like in everything that I'm sure you've done in your life, and in the context of Billions, we just talked about Brian and David, or anything else, having great people on a team and partners and others that help make it happen is how a lot of this really happens. So I wake up, I prepare for the show. I'm oftentimes not just preparing for the show, but I'm making some like last minute edits or changes or whatever to the Dealbook newsletter, which we've mostly tried to get going the night before. There's a team, two folks who are in London overnight who also work on it. Jason Carrion, who's our managing editor, and Michael Dillmerced, who's been with us forever, and they're amazing. So it's a way to sort of read into the show. So then the show from 6 to 9, and as you know, the day before we know, or we like to know, who some of the guests are going to be, and so I can prepare in advance the night before for that. And in that way, I read all the papers like you do. And then from 9 o'clock, it's usually off and running on New York Times stuff. Today I was doing an interview for the Saturday edition of Dealbook before I'm seeing you. I working on another project, so I had to do a call on that. That GameStop film that we're doing with HBO with Jason Blum and Len. So I'm always sort of got my hands in a couple different pots, and that's how it sort of goes. And I have 3 kids, and we've been during at least COVID. I feel like I've hopefully done a bit of a better job because we're all at least together. We're hanging out all the time, which I've enjoyed.
That was one of the benefits.
A whole lot.
I give motivational speeches about trying to teach people about success and whatnot. And one of the things I say to people, I'll tell them the story about how I was before I was working on the Clinton campaign. I was about to meet Governor Clinton in Arkansas in '92, and I was sitting at the next table, and the next table was James Carville, George Stephanopoulos, Mandy Grunwald, the people who are going to be running the world if Clinton got elected. I remember overhearing their conversation, and at the end saying to myself, "Yeah, they're smart. There's no geniuses there." And every CEO I've met of Fortune 500 companies, I walk away. And I go, with the exception of Bill Gates, and I go, okay, they're smart, but there are no geniuses out there. Like, there's no.
Yep.
And I'm curious, you deal with the creme de la creme, the leaders of the world, the big thinkers of the world who are driving it. And is your assessment the same way? That there are very few 100%. Real geniuses?
I 100% agree with you. And I'll tell you that when I started in this business as a journalist covering all this, I have to say, first couple of years, I think I had a very and by the way, I don't want to be cynical about it now, but I think I don't want to say I looked up to them per se, but I did. I thought, oh, look, there's so-and-so. There's so-and-so, big name. You saw him on TV. You saw him in the magazine, front cover of the magazine. They must know something. And I think as you get to know them in reality, the way you just described, you realize that, it doesn't matter how much money you have necessarily in your bank account or what title you have on your business card. They do put their pants on the same way. They do. And it's not, they don't always have the most brilliant ideas. Sometimes they do. Some of them got really lucky. Some of them hustle like crazy. I mean, I think there are elements to all of them. I like to think that there's a reason for some of their success, but you're right. It's not, it's not like you walk into, you go to Davos and, every single person that's, you look every which way and they're all geniuses. They all want to be geniuses. That's for sure.
And most of them think they
or be thought as geniuses at least.
Hey, Andrew Ross Sorkin, you're a class act. I really appreciate you taking the time, man.
You are my friend, and I'm so grateful, and it's nice to see you.
All right, you stay well and keep fighting the good fight. All right.
You do the same. I'm looking forward to watching you in the mornings.
Thank you, buddy. Hope you enjoyed today's episode of On Brand. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe anywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, any place else, and go to YouTube also to see the video. And remember to stay on brand. We will see you next week, or actually listen to you or be heard next week on Brand. Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.